Putting together this presentation has given us the opportunity to reflect on our body of work, the ethos of our practice, and to find the common thread that runs through our projects. The talk this evening will really be structured around these themes. So rather than talking project by project, we will actually talk about the themes that drive us and how our projects sort of reflect this in different ways. So I must start off by talking about partnership. And possibly because of the way Leslie spoke about the fact that we are women in quite a difficult world, the fact that we are together as partners really possibly makes it possible. So I have the most extraordinary partner. She is strong, brave, and very clever. And we've been working together for 15 years. We resisted formality as much as we could, but eventually we capitulated and formed Cohen and Garson in 2014. We are blessed to have a collaboration where the constant debating, discussion, and testing of ideas leads to design resolution that we believe is much more than the sum of the parts. So we've been determined to track our own authentic way of working and have held out against becoming corporate. We have never wanted to do that. And we believe that each project is unique and requires particular talents, and we've employed many young people, hopefully some of who are here this evening. And that's what our current student does a lot of the time, sits and works with a cat on her lap. And as will be elaborated further, entering competitions and sometimes winning them has enabled us to work on large projects that, because of our size and because of the way we choose to structure ourselves, we would have been excluded from. And this project, Wits Art Museum, really is a project that feels like it is the seed that started us on this journey that we now find ourselves. And it touches on themes that will underpin our talk this evening. So this project tackled elements that continue to emerge in subsequent projects. It located us at the heart of designing for educational and cultural projects. It gave us the drive to enter competitions, to engage in the complexity of designing buildings for universities, and to understand the possibility of adaptively reusing space as a means of transformation. We learned how to engage with the client, often in the form of committees with sometimes hidden hierarchies, always with the end users, staff and students in mind. We learned about budgets and the importance of holding firmly onto our concept even when the budget is slashed. And this project is very typical of that. It had costed at 70 million, built for 38 million, and we never feel like we lost the idea. We also learned about what we were good at and what we were not good at. And we feel privileged at this time in South Africa where the inequalities are so extreme, and that somehow by working on these educational projects, we see them as sites of hope, and that believe that these extraordinary university projects are visionary legacy projects that contribute to spatially transforming the lives of many young students previously excluded from universities. And this feels for us a very meaningful way of practicing. So I'm going to hand over to my partner.
I, like Fiona, feel so fortunate to be working on such inspirational projects with a partner who I like and respect so much. It would not be the same without working alone without Fiona's unswerving support. Her deep insight and sensitivity to context and design and people's personalities is invaluable. We have so much fun together. We share the burden of the stress and the joy and satisfaction of our success. Our partnership, however, extends beyond each other. We enjoy the collaborative process which goes into the design and construction of projects. In all the university projects we are working on, there are architects and many other professionals involved. The design, as for most large buildings, is a result of a collaborative process between clients, project managers, engineers, and architects, and of course our own permanent and contract staff. Although we won't necessarily be crediting all involved by name, we would like to acknowledge their invaluable inputs. Although the Wits Art Museum was instrumental in binding our partnership, it was not the first project that we did together. The 7 Houses project is an example of a project that involved extensive collaboration. Our office is located in this complex across the internal street from our own home. Here you can see some of the architects and homeowners involved in the development. All and many others had an important role to play. I am an owner architect, and Fiona was an architect for 2 of the units. For me, the exciting aspect of this project is not only the resultant architecture and common spaces, but the fact that the project was an experiment in social living, a response to our needs for closer community. The scheme provides an alternative to traditional South African cluster housing in its typology, urban design, and social makeup. It is a response to a desire by the owners for security and community within a higher density suburban environment. The scheme responds by creating a richer, shared urban environment than that provided by typical suburban and standalone houses or gated cluster developments in Johannesburg. The project was initiated by 7 families, some of whom you can see in the street. All decisions were achieved through a process of extensive collaboration, negotiation, and compromise. The resultant architecture is therefore a negotiated environment, rather than a single designer's vision. It was this very process, in fact, which came to forge the 7 Houses as a living community. Okay. We created 2 common areas. So, where's my, oh, there we go. The one is the street over here, and the other, the garden space at the back. And to achieve, to activate the road and accommodate the work at home condition required by many of the owners, each house has an outbuilding, so you can see those over here on the side, and opposite the main houses, which are over here. Okay. The access road is then able to become both a circulation space for cars and an avenue for people. It is the public and shared social space of the scheme. The constantly peopled and surveillance condition of the street also allows for a higher level of security within the scheme. The common garden on the other side of the units is a more quiet public space or park into which all the houses face. Okay. Importantly also is that all the units, although they deliberately share some materials and architectural elements, they are all very different in plan. The houses become kind of demonstrations of the multiple design possibilities within the parameter of an identical site with similar accommodation and social requirements. The row house and the courtyard typology allow for both privacy and efficient use of space. So here you can see unit number 1, Lael's unit. I think Lael's sitting here today. And it has a courtyard over here. Here's the street, and it has an outbuilding over here and the garden. And it's the end unit, and you can see a picture of the passage space. This is our own unit, unit number 3. And again, you can see it's different. It has a very small, tight courtyard for ventilation, and another courtyard which opens out onto the garden, and this is our studio at the back. And this is unit number 5. Again, Terry's studio. She's an artist. She works at the back over here, and her house with a courtyard that leads onto the garden, and another courtyard over here for light and ventilation. We'll speak later about the courtyard typology, which comes into a lot of our work. Okay, So we've been living now in the complex for 10 years, living and working very happily together. And we're all still friends, by the way.
The next theme we talk about is that of concept. And rather than making whimsical design decisions, we work on developing an appropriate concept that is a careful response to the context of the project and its requirements. So all design decisions, no matter how detailed, are informed by this concept. And we strive for work that is conceptually strong, each project driven by a core idea. So once again, when we return to the Wits Art Museum project, this is one of the very, very early competition sketches. And it's fascinating to look at it now because it really is very close to where we got to with the project. And it illustrates the very strong idea of storing the collection, which was a big component of the project, to store the massive collection of African art and South African art in a very carefully climate-controlled way. An idea was to really expose that and show that from the outside and from within the gallery. And then at street level, we really wanted to open the gallery up so that pedestrians could really interact with the exhibitions and be drawn into the building. So that's evident on Garsen Street, where you can see the stores above and the open glass facade, which really pulls people to, really engages with the street. And particularly the forecourt. So, the whole notion of really it becoming this gateway to the university. So really, confronting access to the university at a time when security was such an issue. We found a way of doing it. We differed a lot with our clients at the time, but these also very early concept sketches illustrate this desire that we had to connect to the street underneath the stores. And this shows the stores above. These are very early drawings. And here, this is the forecourt area, and all these drawings show about how permeable we wanted the gallery to be at ground level. And we lost the battle because as the project developed and the clients got very engaged with how they needed to work and Wits security got involved, we ended up having to put this glass screen between the pavement and the forecourt gallery. And just to show, everybody, a lot of people know the museum, but this is the 20-story building above the Lawson's Tower, and these are the stores on this level and the gallery spaces below. We spent a lot of time talking, and Nina will elaborate later on what to contain the stores in, and we arrived at the brick. And this became, a real starting point for a lot of work that we continue to do in brick. We also found this beautiful image. Those of us who are over 50, which they will remember filling up with petrol here. It was the old petrol station, an absolutely beautiful 50s building designed in 1955. And we really didn't want to lose that feeling of the way the city sort of engulfs the building and the building gives back to the city. And that's what it then became and how it became repurposed. And our vision, as you can see, was that there would be this real sort of link between pavement and forecourt. And here, unusually, the door is open. The door is never open. When the gallery was opened, I remember we had a fight with the security from Wits. He said it's never going to open, so just get used to it. He said, okay. Then moving on to, for the last 5 years, Nina and I have been engaged in projects for the University of Mpumalanga. I'm talking about concepts, so I don't want to delve into the whole context of that project. But just to say that the university is situated, this is in Mbombela, previously Nelspruit. The university is situated to the north. It has a strange shape. It's divided into what will be the Hilltop campus, the lower campus, and the south campus. We work within a spatial framework done by Ludwig Hansen, And this is the area in which Nina, myself, and 3 other practices have built buildings. Okay, this is all the wonderful people that have worked on this project with us. Some are here, but without all of you, we couldn't have done the project. So thank you. The site is really beautiful. It's made from grassland, so that's standing on the hilltop site, which is yet to be built on, looking back over the legislative buildings of Mpumalanga, over the city of Mbombela. It's truly lush and beautiful. These are orchards. This area is about to be developed with a new phase of buildings. And there you can see the kind of vegetation and some of the new work popping up beyond it. But I want to focus on the 2 buildings that we've done there, but just to let you know, this is zooming in then on the campus where we worked. A lot of these were strange little existing faced brick 2-story buildings. And then came this grand idea for the new university, which then became embedded in these buildings. And Nina and I worked on this building, which is a residential building, the library, the executive office, and recently completed the administrative building. And that's our library. Sits incredibly discreetly in the very forgiving landscape. That's the residence building, which we'll go into in more detail. And that's our recently completed student and staff administrative building. And you're really starting to see this campus taking shape. And that's the executive office building. Currently, the Vice Chancellor's office is right over there. So to focus on the library was such a wonderful opportunity to get to design a library. And libraries in 21st centuries are resource centers. They're very digital, but they also have to have books. And no one was quite sure how many books, and it became really quite difficult to pin down the brief of this resource center. But one thing we were sure of was its siting. It had to have a very hard edge to the square. It had to really act as both the buildings we worked on. We looked at trying to really create buildings that structure the square, one of the university squares between. And we came up with this notion of a wall. So this became our driving conceptual idea, where we would wrap a wall around a courtyard, and this wall would become this expressive element that protected from the harsh climate, because Mpumalanga, Nelspruit, Mbombela is extremely hot. And we needed to protect from the northwest sun. So these are early developments where our idea was that it would be a double-story container that hovered over the ground plane. The project also housed an IT center, an auditorium, and some other facilities. And there again, we started working with brick. And Nina will go into the brick, but it became this, this extremely strong element protecting from the harsh light to the west. Then within, so if that is the outside wall, we then pulled a meter away from that and created a screen of books, which really followed the curve of the external wall. And the section through the library shows how the body of the library hovers above what is once again the kind of theme we were dealing with in WAM, quite a permeable ground plane, which mediates public and private. And between that, a courtyard. So allowing the whole building to open into a courtyard space, which we will elaborate on later. And then the wall, the element of the wall, so this thickened wall with the book stacks pulling away from it. We also worked with quite an evolved system of ventilation, displacement ventilation, which we had to really try and integrate. It uses 30% less energy, but its ducting is massive. And this just shows how we constantly held on through early sketches to our wall design. At this point, we had a penetration through it and we were entering over there. But the later iterations show the resolved plan, which is really the body of the library around a courtyard. And so that there it sits, it hovers it's interesting because of the very sloping site. It hovers above the ground but is almost on level with these existing quite strange water bodies. And that's it from the back and under construction. And then the bookshelves. So we knew that because we didn't know how many books there were, we still wanted the shelving to be a very expressive element in our library. So we turned it into really a screen that houses a number of functions. So these are plenums for the displacement ventilation duct. These are obviously the bookshelves. And these are desks which are at bar stool height where people can sit and work. And up above is the balustrading level for the gantry above. So we've yet to see books in it. We are looking forward to seeing it actually open with books, which I believe it is going to soon. But it holds its own without books, and that was the idea. That's during construction. What's very nice is that the soft southeast light washes on the wall from above this and spills into the library. Okay, then the recently completed building, and Mark Shearer is here. He worked very closely with us on this building. It's the administrative building for students, so it's where students come to register, and staff administration. And it is the termination of an axis from a long row of now very new teaching facilities up there. And there is a new public square in this place, and the road runs along the south of the building. So, and campus, actually this particular campus ends on here. So these buildings of ours are very prominent as you drive past the campus. So we really felt in this building, because these two buildings were the last two buildings that we did in this phase, and we felt that they culminated in all the work we'd been doing on the other buildings. And it was this idea that we struck in the residences where we built very close together buildings which created these wonderful air channels and really started creating cool microclimates. And Nina and I became very fascinated with this notion where they would sometimes be strips and they would open out and become courtyard areas, and we sort of structured our building around this. So these are early conceptual sketches where we were looking at how our building bounded a courtyard, a large courtyard. This building has actually a first-story courtyard, and this one has a ground courtyard. But very clear is this notion of strips with thin circulation spaces that get ventilated. Here we were looking at, how our building would respond to all the pedestrian access, pedestrian routes, because it's full of students registering, it's full of staffs related to student functions, and it has vehicular, possibly even buses at some point, taxis and bicycles running along the front of it. We were also exploring notions of very efficient buildings. So we had two circulation cores near the square, bounding the square, and two on the north side there and there. And then the facade treatment became a big challenge because, well, not a challenge, but something one has to deal with there, which is around, making openings in a window on a north facade in Mpumalanga is tricky. You can't have huge expansive openings. You need to have overhangs. And we were looking at how do we create these punctured smaller openings. And then on the south facade, because of lessons we'd learned, which we'll touch on later in previous buildings, we were looking at how do we dissolve the facade and completely open it up to views to the south. And then we quite like looking at the final plans because we didn't lose the idea. We were able to hold onto the idea. And I think that's what Nina and I try and do in every single project. So these are the properly developed, built plans, which show the offices, the passages, the courtyards, and the strips. And we're proud of this building because it came in built on time, thank you, Mark, and in budget, which is unheard of. So that's the resolution of the building. And Nina will talk more about the brick and how we sort of dealt with the brick. And that's the building under construction. Those are the thin channels between the building, which really do pull in gusts of air and create these microclimates. And that's the building there. And that there, the building sits in relation to the library on the right. That's quite an interesting photograph as you see campus taking shape.
Context is not only about the physical location of a project, but rather includes the social, urban, natural and economic contexts. We try to consider all of these as design drivers. We would like again to return to WAM to demonstrate how context informed the design. The brief was to design a new 5,000 square meter museum for Wits that would have extensive gallery space and specialized storage facilities for the vast African and South African collection. The new museum was also to accommodate curators and related academic facilities and the necessary back-of-house functions. The site was specifically allocated space in 3 adjacent buildings. The first was what's known as Dental House. It was the basement. The second was part of the Lawson's building. And the third was the building which it's called Corner House, and it was the building which had the petrol station below it. The challenge was to seamlessly link these different buildings with individual character and structural systems. So I'm now going to run through some slides, before and after slides, which reveal the existing context that we were working with and how our renovation responded and transformed this context. So this was the original main space of the Lawson building, which was originally designed as an auction space or motor vehicle showroom actually, and then became an auction space. And when we inherited it, it was being used as a kind of makeshift gallery space. And there's, once it was completed, you can see how we peeled away the sky to allow light, the roof and the slab above to allow light to come in. That's a view of that same hall towards Garsen Street, and that's how we transformed it. This was the security guards for the Lawson building, and that's our very proud security guard in the new Lawson's building. This was a very beautiful but derelict staircase, which we rescued. And here you can see the view out towards Garsen Street from the Lawson's building lobby, and how we transformed it over here. These tiles, which you'll notice in some of the slides, were actually, there were some very old shutters, like sort of blinds, and when we removed them, we discovered, like unbeknown to anyone, that they had these beautiful blue tiles. So we restored them, and then we also put these little brass buttons on them to cover up where the previous louvers were attached, and it sort of was also reminiscent of African beadwork. We used that opportunity. Okay. So the museum's unique location at the edge of Wits campus allowed us the opportunity to create real links between the university and Braamfontein. As Fiona has mentioned, we did this by extending the pavement into the forecourt. So here you can see the forecourt with the doors open. We create public engagement with the gallery spaces and artworks through large glass facades. You can see that's the facade onto Garsen Street with the blue tiles and the brass knobs on them. Okay. The notion of connectivity extends beyond the museum's relation to the city to include links within the museum itself. The 5 gallery spaces, each with different spatial natures, are all linked to facilitate smooth flow and circulation and easy disabled access. Ramps are located within the exhibition space rather than on the periphery, thereby placing the museum visitor within the exhibit. A long flight of flat steps. It was meant to be a ramp, but then we got our levels wrong, so we turned them into flat steps. And they slow the walker down as they move from one gallery space to another. Okay. Sometimes context is not as close to home as it was at the Wits Art Museum project. Having been successful in this competition, we decided to try our luck a bit further afield. So in 2015, we entered a competition for the new Guggenheim Museum in Helsinki. The competition was done in collaboration with Hilton Juden, who was the lead designer, and Yvonne Brecher, who was working for us at the time. The beauty of competitions is that they let you imagine buildings and contexts way beyond the realm of one's own reality. Helsinki for us was so foreign. It is contrasting in its climatic, social, cultural, urban, and economic context to Braamfontein. We didn't win this competition, but we really enjoyed doing it. And it's great that we have the opportunity to show it today, because of course it's never going to be built. So I'm just going to run through the slides of the competition that we entered. And I would like to just read a paragraph that Hilton wrote as part of the submission. We are balancing the need for a low, modest structure that does not block views towards and from the park by placing the bulk of the museum in a base under a public deck while offering an iconic floating lighthouse as a gateway to the harbour. From across the harbour, the museum is a seasonally reconfigured silhouette. It comes alive in different ways and involves varying audiences throughout the year. More compact and intimate in cold winter months for the community, opening up in summer to expose tourists as well as locals to sun and breezes. In this way, a greater sense of season and an acute awareness of immediate surroundings permeates the building as both a response to weather and evolving art and design and programming. So, yeah, you can see in the sections the deck with these iconic sort of timber structures, and we decided to use wood because we thought it was a good Scandinavian material. Okay. So another competition, which demonstrates our response to context, is the Sol Plaatje University in Kimberley, Stage 2. The competition entry shown here was for the renovation and addition to existing buildings. The visionary urban design of the university was conceived by Ludwig Hansen. It is located in the center of the city of Kimberley. As such, it is becoming a groundbreaking urban renewal project. This renewal is evident after the first phase of its construction. Kimberley has begun to transform. The integration with and opening towards the city reflects the attitude of equality in access to higher education in the post-apartheid South Africa. The human and urban scale of the new university reflects consideration for the individual as well as the city fabric. University education is no longer only for the elite. The university building is no longer secluded in its own precinct, an ivory tower. Its public spaces are open to all in Kimberley. It is within this context that we framed our submission strategy. We also touched on the complexity of conservation. Protecting a building that may be a symbol of colonialism, apartheid, and inequality is challenging. We see the opportunity to reinvent through reprogramming, creating a new layer of meaning while still acknowledging the past. This juxtaposition of past and present layers will establish a rich, contemporary, vibrant university city. We also dealt with strategies to deal with the harsh climate context of Kimberley. So just again to quickly run through the entry, showed a lot of wham. And we did in fact win this competition and are currently designing our first buildings at Saltplaatjie. And here also just to quickly go through them, these slides, just in sketch design phase.
So courtyard typology has been a design driver for many of our projects. They offer opportunities for passive cooling through cross ventilation. They are secure outside zones, and we believe they are underutilized as a building type in this country with its mostly temperate climate. So the 7 houses discussed earlier are row houses, each having their own courtyard. And this row house typology reduces the narrow, difficult to use spaces between units, but then one needs the courtyard to sort of mitigate that. And this figure ground drawing really is a beautiful drawing showing how the outside spaces sort of find their way through courtyards into the fabric of the building. So this is Nina's courtyard, so that's in her kitchen looking through the courtyard all the way through to the street. They provide this light, cool transparency in the heart of the house. This is Kurgan Lewis's house, where this thin, tall, double volume glass screen mediates between inside and outside from what is actually a very private courtyard. And the staircase winds itself inside and then outside onto a roof terrace. And there is this whole connection between very private and the rest of the house. And Bethlehem Potenza house, number 1, can completely open up, and the outside and the courtyard almost becomes a secondary outside room. Then to Mpumalanga. So the residences in Mpumalanga, we used the courtyard typology, which seemed appropriate for the residential blocks in that it creates public and private common outdoor space and is climatically appropriate. It facilitates moments of calm within the university environment as well as social gathering spaces. And so the most public space within, which is what is quite a complex residential set of buildings, are these public spaces which spill out into the courtyard. And here we were looking at, this is really what the residence building looks like, which is a set of blocks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4 of which have these 3-story high courtyards. And this is the thin gully channels which emerged and created this really cool microclimate in the space. Each room has cross ventilation, which is very important in a climate like this, which is so unbelievably harsh, and these buildings are never going to be air conditioned. So to look at the lower ground plan, there we have those public facilities that spill out onto that courtyard, the image of which you've just seen, and then the tight, or you could say there were 5 by 5 meter courtyards within each apartment block. And there again, they repeat in these blocks. And in section, looking at how even within the building is the courtyard, and between buildings, courtyard spaces. And the importance of creating these extremely cool, shadowed spaces. And that's once again the thin galley spaces between. I'd like to also just take this opportunity to talk a little bit about one of these blocks. Okay, so this building, the residential building, of all the university buildings that have been built, we've been told, is one of the most efficient. And a lot of it is to do with the fact that, as you can see, there's almost no circulation. So this is the plan of 2 apartment blocks entered from a common staircase. You either enter left or you enter right. When you enter left, you come to a common space, which is mirrored on the other side, opening to the courtyard. So, and then from there, you enter the bedrooms and a bathroom block, which is break away from the whole notion of ablution, but are these small, little, intimate bathroom spaces. So we really try to create more of an apartment-like way for students to live rather than an institutional type of environment, so common in residences. These courtyards were not designed by us, and they're very sort of, early days. But when these 3 large indigenous trees grow, I think those courtyards are going to be absolutely beautiful and breezy and create these wonderful microclimates. Okay, then the courtyard of the library. So the library wraps the wall that I've spoken about, wraps around here, and that is the inner courtyard of the library, which has a very sort of different open nature to the outer wall. And that is how the wall reveals itself on the inside. The courtyard is, it's like an outdoor foyer. So one enters the building through security zones over there, and you are in the secure precinct at this point. And from that secure precinct, you then enter the body of the library, or you ramp down or ramp up to enter what is the resource center on this side, or you enter the auditorium. So it really becomes this secondary kind of a public space. And just the cool, as you enter, the cool undercover colonnaded spaces that are successful in this project. And then looking back, I like this because of the scale, and it just shows the relationship of the student administration building to the courtyard in front of it, bounded by the building on the other side.
So you've probably noticed by now that our preferred building material is the brick. Brick is tried and tested traditional South African material. It is familiar to all contractors. It is available throughout the country, varying in accordance with the local clay and brick yards. Bricks are robust, they're long-lasting, and require no maintenance. Their simple modularity allows for infinite amounts of configurations, bringing unique patterns and textures to each building. The material formed from clay and the intricate patterns created by the design are both reminiscent of African pottery, weaving, and beading. Our love affair with bricks began when searching for material to clad the WAM stores. This, as discussed previously, was a central aspect of our concept, and we had always thought of using something shiny. While playing with these children's blocks, we became very excited about the possibility of brick. Not only would it relate to the African treasures within, but would also reference the hundreds of brick buildings throughout Braamfontein and the Johannesburg CBD. We decided to use a double-cant dark brick by Cora Brick. The brick face projects from the edge of the corner building. So you can see over here, that's the existing building, and that's the new brick face. And the shape we copied from the curve of the mezzanine of the existing building, which I'll speak about later as well. So here you can see the brick, different views. Okay, and this brick in a way becomes the icon of the museum, pronouncing itself to Braamfontein. Okay. Throughout all the buildings we designed at UMP, we have used a variation of brick configurations to create patterns and textures. As part of a drive for the building of the university to benefit local industry, we chose a brick manufactured in a nearby factory. We played with the juxtaposition of its smooth front face with its grooved back face to create textures and patterns. So this is the image of the library building, and this was part of the screen brickwork of the executive building. Okay, and over here you can see some old Nguni ruins of the area, which are also so reminiscent of the, both in color and just the whole feel of the brick we chose. The external skin over here of the administrative building is also made of face brick. The brick has been laid from, to form a subtle grid section, and we achieved this by creating a smooth grid of brickwork with a slightly projected grooved face of the brickwork as panels. And this also became the grid through which we developed the windows. So the openings of the windows, you can see, worked with this grid. And here you can see, again, that breeze canyon that Fiona spoke about in the residence building. And we used a sort of a patterned brickwork over here to differentiate these projected elements from the rest of the building. Okay. Another element which repeatedly occurs in our work is the screen. They have varying functions, and which include mitigation of harsh sunlight, protection, replacing burglar bars, defining space that is still open to the elements, and creating layers of privacy. In the Beyers Naudé Square, which Hugh Fraser helped us do, and it was renovated in 2009, the glass screens form a wall of the stair towers which access the parking garage below. The screens became the main element of the square. They light up at night. The image of Beyers Naudé printed on the glass commemorates the square as a place of public protest. The fragility of the glass contrasts the tough nature of the inner city. In House Gibson, we used a steel screen to encase the entire addition to an existing house in Park View. I worked on this job with Nabil Essa, who's also here today. The screen served as both sun shielding, burglar proofing, and creating a layer of privacy for an essentially glass facade. See the bedroom? Okay. This security screen is in my own house, encloses the upstairs bedrooms from the living space below. And this screen in House Honnet is a balustrade. Okay, so you've seen these screens before in, as Fiona showed you, the courtyards, but these were done in collaboration with the artist Tamar Mason, and we reimagined the wind block. So I suppose, like the brick, it's a kind of old, tested thing which have been forgotten since the 80s, but we used to use it a lot then. And we used the standard cottage frame inserts, which is a subframe, and we inserted into the squares of the cottage frame, you can see over here, cut pieces of different colored terracotta tiles to form a pattern. You can see, so that's from the roof terrace of the building. See, the screens are also used in the stairwells to sort of combination with the pattern brickwork. Okay, and as a variation to the residence screens for the executive office buildings, we combined brick panels with wind block, terracotta tiles, glass, and rough cast plaster. Here you can see the screen. Okay, so here so that's on the north facade of the building. And here you can see the screens on the south facade of the building under construction. And these screens were later removed because even though they were successful for sun protection, it was felt that they blocked the beautiful view to the south. Okay. Here you can see again the screen on the north side of the of the executive building, and you can see we also used screens to sort of mitigate the north light in the library, and also over the roof, because you look down on this roof, and also to try and mitigate the harsh sun onto a steel roof. And there you can see some the steel screen, which sort of define the more private courtyard of the library from the main entrance square of the university. And finally, the curve. So we'll end off by talking about the curve. And once again, we revisit WAM to understand the breakaway from rectilinear form and the exploration of the curve in our building. So the 1950s curve in the existing University Corner building continues to inspire our form. So here you can see it was the mezzanine level above the petrol station. This is how it was, and after we renovated it. And another view. It was always quite a pity to get rid of these angled glass facades. But the need to connect the two spaces without having the glass there was sort of a priority for us, and so we sadly said goodbye to them. And here you can see how that curve informed the curve of this, as well as the ramp. And there. And this is just to show you the desk in the new administrative building. And again, sometimes when we're battling to find the right curve, we go back to the WAM curve because it's just so beautiful. And again, in the library.